more and more information keeps coming about the Maryland father who was deported. Oh no! He kind of just keeps getting objectively worse. Also, Ilhan Omar, everyone's favorite congresswoman to make fun of, didn't go high when, that's what Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And also, running. Is it the new privilege dropping on the woke whatever they're talking about? All that more coming up on this episode of Turning Point tonight. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in. Together, we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. This is Turning Point tonight. Now, before we get to that and before we get to our panel, there is a crazy thing going on in California, but I repeat myself. If anything's going on in California, it's most likely crazy. Look, there is a bill called AB 379, which has a provision in it that Libs intentionally took out. What is the provision? Well, let me set this up first. Currently, the law in California is such that if anyone solicits prostitution of anyone under the age of 16, it is a misdemeanor or felony. In other words, it is a pretty big punishment. Now, I use finger quotes to say prostitution because in California, the age of consent is 18. So if you're under 18, well, you don't get to consent, and therefore it's not prostitution, it's sex slavery. We'll just call it what it is. So that aside, the current law says, okay, well, it's a felony if they're under 16 and you attempt to purchase them for sex, which again is horrible and we want to get rid of. That goes without saying. However, in this bill, there was a provision that said, okay, we're going to include 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds because currently the law is under 16. And that seems thoroughly reasonable. So reasonable so that Gavin Newsom, the far left lib Democrat governor of California, said, yeah, it's probably a pretty good idea. Now, instead of just pass this law, the California legislature, the assembly said, absolutely not. We're not going to put this into law, and actively took it out. In other words, it wasn't something that like had this kind of slipped under the rug. We didn't really notice. It's 16. It was in the bill to say, hey, we're going to include 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds in this because, again, they can't consent. They can't be legal prostitution workers, even if you agree whether or not that should be legal. I don't, but that's beside the point. If you're under the age of 18, you cannot consent, and therefore it's not okay. This bill had that in there, and Democrats actively took it out. Why? Because California is where sanity goes to die. That's the only reason I think anybody could actually give. Here to comment on that and so much more is host of the Chris Hand Show, Chris Hand, and Natalie Jean Beisner, whose literal title, and she asked for this, is a former Democrat. So appreciate that. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Chris, I want to start with you. So it wasn't like a, hey, this was left out of the bill and nobody kind of saw this. There was an active move by the California Democrats in the assembly to say, hold on. This provision that says it makes it a felony for 16 and 17-year-old prostitution solicitation, a felony, let's actually actively take that out. We all know California is the place where sanity goes to die. Chris, why?
I have no idea. I think you said it best, though. You can't have a child prostitute. You can have a child sex slave. And that's exactly what's going on in California. And the lawmakers there don't want to punish individuals going after underage prostitutes. It's insane. Personally, I would advocate for wood chipper feet first. I know that's a little bit extreme, but that's just kind of the route that I would go. As a father of 4, I think that you need to go that route with these kind of heinous crimes. The people in California don't even want to punish these kind of heinous crimes. I would act like I'm surprised, but it's the state of California, and I don't think that there's any surprise in them doing this kind of insane activity ever. Is there? Yeah. Are you surprised?
Yeah, Chris, that is a pretty controversial statement. Wood chipper feet first is a little bit more aggressive and dangerous than head first. Head first, it's over almost immediately.
Clean.
And the controversial statement of the day is feet first versus head first if you go into the wood chipper for, again, abusing children, which I think is probably an adequate penalty. Natalie, even Gavin Newsom has come out and said, this is pretty reasonable. What are we doing, guys? And his own party is going against him. Is there a competition in California who can be the most woke? And if by woke you mean legalizing the abuse of kids, is that like what's going on here?
Probably. I'm in California, and that's part of why I'm no longer a Democrat. Just to be like completely clear, in my state currently, as of today, soliciting someone who is 16 or 17-year-old is a misdemeanor, not a felony, and it's punishable by 2 days up to a year in prison. And it's my understanding that up until last year, when Newsom signed a law, that soliciting someone who's 16 and 17 or soliciting someone who's under the age of 16 could have been punished as a misdemeanor or a felony for your first offense. So it was like the judge's choice. And now it's a felony for under the age of 16. And like you said, this bill had a provision that would have made it a felony for 16 and 17-year-olds. And the Democrats voted against it. And their reasoning was that they said that teenagers who are LGBT or in interracial relationships with someone who's maybe 18 or 19, that their parents were going to weaponize this law against those teens. And I don't know why they specified LGBT or interracial, because you could have, say, a white young woman who's 17 in a relationship with a white young man who's 18. But what they really mean is that Christian conservative parents who they think are bigots and racists are going to use this to go after the black 18-year-old man who's in a relationship with their 17-year-old daughter or whatever else. It's completely crazy. And it's again an example of them putting the interests and the hypothetical feelings of like a very small minority over children, just children of every color, every orientation, whatever else, just everyone's feelings over children.
Yeah, and it is ridiculous. Chris, I probably should have showed you this video before I got your answer, but I want to get a brief reaction from you to this. This is one of the co-sponsors of the bill, I believe, saying, well, let me know if you think this person is, in fact, hinged or unhinged. Play that clip real quick.
The author and I are doubling down.
30 seconds.
It is not the intent, but it is the commitment that we bring a bill that is better than what was presented. If you do not vote for this today, what you said that you cared about 16 and 17-year-old was a lie. That you don't care.
Yeah, their contention was, well, the only reason this provision was in there is Republicans playing politics. And I think we just witnessed a video of one of these co-sponsors of the bill also playing politics. Chris, do you have a quick reaction to that?
She seems fun. She seems like somebody you'd want to hang out with and have over your house for dinner, doesn't she? No, completely unhinged. But do you expect anything else coming out of California? I honestly just feel bad for these people. They walk through life so upset about things they shouldn't be upset about, including making it a felony to solicit minor prostitutes. It's insane. These people need help.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And speaking of things that are ridiculous, I'm not sure if that was a great enough transition, but the NPR, the National Public Radio, or as some people call it, nakedly progressive radio, is, well, facing some criticism by the conservatives, including President Trump, who's trying to... We talked about this. We don't have time to explain the entire hierarchy of it, but there's an organization that the federal government funds, and that organization funds a lot of individual radio stations and TV stations that then purchase the syndicated NPR. Again, kind of complicated. President Trump is going after their funding. Natalie, I think a lot of people who were formerly on the left or even moderately on the right now maybe don't even mind NPR if they were true to their cause of, oh, well, we're down the middle. But unfortunately, there were 0 people in the NPR newsroom that identified as conservatives or Republicans. Is this going to be welcomed by the majority of American people who kind of think, yeah, NPR has gone off the rails, and if they're as far left as they are now, they probably shouldn't deserve funding? Is that, you think that's something the American people will buy?
Yeah, I think it's welcomed by anyone who's not an unhinged progressive Democrat. I mean, there was Pew Research in 2019 that said that 87% of NPR's audience identifies as Democrat. And there was actually a really good, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with it, but there was a really good piece last year in Barry Weiss's Free Press by someone who had worked for NPR for 25 years, was a liberal Trump hater. And he wrote kind of a tell-all of how they lost their diverse audience. And for that, he was put on leave and then eventually kind of forced to resign because there was so much hostility. And if your audience doesn't represent the American people, by and large, which is what this man was admitting, who hates Donald Trump and is, again, a liberal raised by a lesbian, well, then why do you deserve our federal tax dollars? And of course, they're going to act like the sky is falling. But really, if you look at it, it's like PBS, their federal funding is 15% of PBS's budget and 1% of NPR's. So everything's probably going to continue as normal, and they're going to keep being a mouthpiece for the DNC, and no one's even going to notice that this happened or that federal funding was cut. But of course, they're going to act like, the sky's falling.
Well, that's the thing, is direct federal funding is a small percentage of it, but they go this roundabout way, and it actually funds like closer to half, if not 60% of it. Chris, I'm curious here, so do you think in order to attempt to avert Trump pulling funding, NPR will try and go more of the conservative route, or at least be somewhat down the middle? And if they're going to do that, they're going to have to hire people that may be more conservative. And if they do that, would you be willing to take your radio show to NPR in order to hopefully get them to avert the gaze of President Trump trying to cut their funding?
No, and I don't even know what that would look like if they tried to be more conservative or more down the middle. I feel like we wouldn't agree with it anyway. But I mean, without the taxpayers funding this stuff, how are we going to get hard-hitting reporting from NPR, like stories about cannibalism and eating women's placentas? That's a real story, by the way. How are we going to learn about all of the wonderful things that the left is doing and all the evil things that the Trump administration is doing? It's funny, when they did the RNC and the DNC, it was 72% negative coverage for the RNC, 88% positive coverage for the DNC. This is not a nonpartisan organization by any stretch of the imagination. And I think if they had to monetize it, and we've talked about this before, if they had to monetize it in the same way that my radio station monetizes it privately, I think that they would fail. I'm more excited about the PBS losing their funding. As a dad of 4 kids, I am so frustrated when Elmo is pushing vaccines and Pride Month, and when Arthur is telling kids that white people are racist. I don't think that has any place in a kid's show. And I don't think any parent who was raised on PBS, if they're not paying attention, is safe to leave their kids watching PBS unguarded. Yeah. So I'm more looking forward to that aspect of it. I think adults can figure things out for themselves for the most part. But the kids, going after the kids is always much more touchy for me.
Yeah, until they start airing reruns of Mr. Rogers, I don't think I'm letting my kids watch PBS anytime soon. Chris and Natalie will be back right after the break to discuss the Maryland father and everyone's favorite congresswoman to dislike, Ilhan Omar. All that and more coming up after the break. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.